White cops arrest black man, and in court, he reveals who he really is, shocking everyone. The gym was mostly empty that evening, the rhythmic clanking of weights and occasional bursts of music echoing in the large space. Marcus Grant, dressed in a simple blue hoodie and black joggers, finished his last set of pull-ups. He wiped his brow with a towel, glancing at the clock. It was late, and the crowd had thinned out. He had just started packing his duffel bag when 3 cops strode in. Marcus noticed them immediately, the swagger in their step, the sideways glances they exchanged. Something was off. One of the officers, a burly man with a thick mustache, stopped a few feet from Marcus and pointed. "You, step over here." Marcus sighed inwardly but maintained his composure. "Is there a problem, officer? But before we dive into what happens next, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below." The second cop, a wiry man with a sneer permanently etched on his face, chimed in. "You match the description of someone we're looking for." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "And what description is that?" The third cop, silent until now, pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Don't make this difficult. Turn around." Marcus could feel the weight of their stares, the barely veiled hostility in their tone. He calmly placed his bag on the bench. "I haven't done anything wrong. You sure you want to do this?" The burly cop stepped closer, his voice a low growl. "Turn around. Now." Marcus knew there was no point arguing. He turned and allowed them to cuff him, his expression calm, almost indifferent. The ride to the station was tense. The cops exchanged smug glances, clearly enjoying themselves. Marcus remained silent, his eyes scanning his surroundings. At the station, they shoved him into a holding cell without explanation. Hours passed before they finally told him he'd be arraigned in the morning. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't call anyone. He simply waited. Court was a small, unassuming room packed with the usual players. A bored clerk, an overworked public defender, and a judge who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The 3 cops sat smugly in the back, whispering to each other and occasionally glancing at Marcus, who sat at the defendant's table, still wearing his blue hoodie. The judge peered over his glasses. "Mr. Grant, you're charged with resisting arrest and obstructing an investigation. How do you plead?" Marcus stood, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "Your Honor, I'd like to represent myself." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about that?" "Very sure," Marcus said, his voice steady. The cops in the back exchanged confused looks. The prosecutor began laying out the case, painting Marcus as uncooperative and suspicious. He claimed the officers were justified in their actions because Marcus had refused to answer their questions and resisted when they tried to detain him. When it was Marcus's turn to speak, he walked up to the bench calmly, his hands in the pockets of his hoodie. "Your Honor," he began, his tone casual, "before I defend myself, I'd like to establish a few facts." The judge leaned forward slightly. "Go ahead." Marcus turned to the prosecutor. "Did the officers provide a valid reason for detaining me?" The prosecutor hesitated. "They had reasonable suspicion." "Reasonable suspicion of what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but firm. The prosecutor faltered. Marcus turned to the judge. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench?" The judge nodded, intrigued. Marcus pulled a small leather wallet from his pocket and handed it to the judge. The courtroom fell silent as the judge opened it. His eyes widened as he read the badge inside. "Agent Marcus Grant," the judge said slowly, disbelief evident in his voice. "FBI." The room froze. The cops in the back stiffened, their faces draining of color. Marcus turned to face them, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Not just FBI," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "Assistant Director of the Counter-Terrorism Division." One of the cops muttered a curse under his breath. Marcus took a step closer to the bench. "Your Honor, I was conducting a low-profile investigation when these officers decided to harass me without cause. They ignored procedure, violated my rights, and falsely accused me, and I let them." The judge blinked. "You let them?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because sometimes, the best way to expose corruption is to let it show itself." The aftermath was swift and brutal for the officers. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation. Marcus's badge and rank ensured that every detail of the incident was scrutinized. The three cops, once smug and confident, now found themselves on the defensive. As Marcus left the courtroom, one of the officers, the burly one, called out to him, "You set us up!" Marcus stopped and turned, his gaze piercing. "No, you set yourselves up. I just gave you the opportunity." With that, he walked out, the faint trace of a smile on his face, ready to get back to the real work of justice. As Marcus exited the courtroom, the chill of the early morning air hit him, but he barely noticed. His mind was already several steps ahead, processing what needed to be done next. This wasn't just about three rogue cops. It was about the culture that allowed them to act with impunity. He reached his car, a nondescript black sedan, and slid inside. Marcus pulled out his phone and called his superior. "Director Davis," a voice answered sharply. "It's done," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "The officers made their move, and I've got everything documented. Their precinct will need a deep probe." Davis sighed heavily on the other end. "You always did have a way of turning a small operation into a storm. Do you have evidence to bring the precinct down?" "Oh, I've got more than enough," Marcus replied. "But this isn't just about one precinct. I want to push for a state-level inquiry." There was a pause. "Ambitious," Marcus smirked faintly. "You didn't promote me for playing it safe." Back at the precinct, the three officers sat in the break room, their nerves frayed. Clayton, the wiry one, paced back and forth while the burly cop Tom leaned against the counter, scowling. The third officer, a younger man named Reed, sat quietly, his face pale. "Do you think he's serious about going after us?" Reed finally asked, his voice shaky. "Of course he's serious," Tom snapped. "He's FBI. Assistant director, no less. We're screwed." Clayton stopped pacing, his eyes darting around. "We've got to figure something out. We can't just let this happen. What if we, I don't know, discredit him somehow?" Tom glared at him. "Discredit the assistant director of the FBI? You've lost your damn mind." Reed rubbed his temples. "They're gonna dig into everything. Complaints, arrests, body cam footage. We're done." The room fell into a heavy silence, each man grappling with the weight of their actions. Meanwhile, Marcus met with his investigator, a sharp-witted woman named Naomi Bennett. She had been with him for years, her expertise in unraveling corruption unmatched. Naomi placed a thick folder on the table in front of Marcus. "This is everything on the precinct. Complaints, lawsuits, internal memos. It's worse than we thought." Marcus flipped through the folder, his expression hardening. "They've been targeting minority neighborhoods for years. False arrests, excessive force. And their captain? Complicit in all of it." Naomi nodded. "The captain's been covering for them. It's all here. But the real kicker is this." She slid another file across the table. Marcus opened it and frowned. It contained a series of emails between the precinct's leadership and a local developer. The precinct had been arresting residents in a predominantly black neighborhood to clear the way for the developer's gentrification project. "They were clearing out families for profit," Marcus muttered, his jaw tightening. Naomi crossed her arms. "This could blow everything wide open. If we take this to the Attorney General, the fallout will be massive." Marcus closed the folder and looked at her. "Let's make it happen." By the end of the week, the investigation had expanded to include not just the three officers, but the entire precinct and its ties to the developer. Subpoenas were issued, and Marcus personally oversaw the collection of evidence. The three officers were officially suspended, their names plastered on internal memos as examples of misconduct. Clayton tried to cut a deal, offering to testify against his colleagues, but Marcus refused. "I'm not interested in a deal," Marcus told him during an interrogation. "You're all going down together." Clayton slumped in his seat, defeated. Months later, Marcus stood in a packed courtroom as the captain of the precinct and the developer were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. The three officers, stripped of their badges, faced their own trials. As the judge read out the sentences, Marcus watched without a hint of satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. Naomi leaned over and whispered, "Another win for the books," Marcus nodded. "But there's always another fight waiting." He left the courthouse, his blue hoodie now replaced by a crisp suit, ready to take on the next battle. Justice, after all, was a relentless pursuit, and Marcus Grant was built for it.